Old cards in a new format, it's time to look at LucaMetal. Welcome back everyone to more from the Sableyes. I'm Mitch, and today we're going to take a look at Lucario Melmetal with Zacian and Zamazenta. This deck has seen a bit of success in the early days of the new Darkness Ablaze format. The standard rotation means that now these cards are just super good. They're super consistent, super powerful, capable of taking some knockouts, and Zamazenta V is now walling about 50% of the meta. So that's really strong. What we'll do is we'll jump over into PTCGO now and take a look at how the deck is built. So this is our LucaMetal Zacian list, obviously focused around Lucario Melmetal. It's kind of rich calling it LucaMetal. There's only one copy of Lucario Melmetal in this list. It's more of like a turbo Zacian deck more than anything, but there is a lot of consistency here and a lot of cards that are going to try and get this GX attack in Full Metal Wall off. Let's talk about Full Metal Wall and how useful it is in this particular deck. Obviously, with one energy, it is going to reduce your opponent's damage by 30, which is already really strong. If you've got 2 energy on it, though, which is relatively easy to do with cards like Metal Saucer, we can discard all of the energy off of our opponent's active Pokemon. Now, that doesn't sound like too much, but when you consider the fact that cards like Eternatus are powering up their attackers manually, cards like Center Scorch are relying on massive energy stacks on one Pokemon, cards like Charizard VMAX obviously relying on having 5 energy, lots of cards failing to have easy energy acceleration, Full Metal Wall can really hamper some decks' plans. Also, this is the only card in our list that is worth 3 prizes. The rest of our deck, relatively easy to deal with. We've got 2 prize cards in Zacian V and Zamazenta V. Both of these cards work really well in tandem, and when they're taking 30 less damage from attacks, they're obviously very strong. Intrepid Sword on Zacian V, ability that we've had around for a long time. We can accelerate energy to the Pokemon through using this ability. We can draw extra cards in the early game, very good. And Brave Blade is our most powerful attack. 3 metal energies, it does 230 damage, which is a pretty big number. Now, anything that is going to really threaten Zacian V to hit it for a one-shot is probably going to either be a Fire-type Pokemon, which there's not much we can really do to deal with that, or it's going to be a VMAX, and Zamazenta V is a perfect way to deal with that. Zamazenta hasn't seen a lot of play in recent times because there's not been enough VMAXs in the format to make it relevant, but now we're in the Darkness Ablaze format, there are a lot of VMAX Pokemon floating around, so Zamazenta V is a really good option. Dauntless Shield prevents all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from our opponent's active Pokemon VMAX, which is obviously really strong, and Assault Tackle for 130 deals a lot of damage for a very easy to pull off attack cost of double metal, 1 colorless. We can also discard a special energy from our opponent's active as well if we're attacking with Assault Tackle, which means that decks that rely on special energy can sometimes find themselves attachments behind whilst not being able to take knockouts. Now, you might say, well, you can just knock this Zamazenta out with a regular V Pokemon. Maybe they just use their basic and take the knockout. Well, that's fine, because we can just follow up with Zacian. Zacian takes knockouts on anything that can knock out Zamazenta, and Zamazenta can handle all of the things that can deal with Zacian. Nice little pairing there. It's almost as if they've designed these cards to work with each other. We also have one other attacking Pokemon in the list. It is Evil Admonition Hoopa, a really strong colorless attacker that can potentially deal some solid damage to Eternatus. They like to fill their bench up with Pokemon that have abilities, things like Zigzagoons and Eternatus VMAXs and Crobats and stuff, so we can deal a lot of damage for a relatively cheap cost on a 1 prize attacker. That is very acceptable. Our other Pokemon in the deck are all consistency based. We've got 1 copy of Crobat V for extra draw and an Eldegoss to help us find our supporters. And then we have 2 copies of Primate Wisdom Oranguru. They're really good for conserving resources or for guaranteeing that we hit energy off of our Intrepid Swords, or to guarantee that we hit a supporter off of our next turn should we get Marnied or something like that. A very solid card to include in this list. The rest of the deck is all about consistency or disruption. We're trying to slow our opponent down whilst being able to take our knockouts as they come. We've got a couple of disruption cards. Cards like Power Plant can turn off the Den GX and also really hinder Mewtwo and Mew Tag Team GX, which is still around, by the way. Still floating around in this format, so be careful of that. And we also have 4 copies of Crushing Hammer in the deck as well to allow us to stop our opponent from attacking. So if we can remove their energy, that would be great. 2 copies of Reset Stamp as well can shuffle our opponent's hand down. If they've got knockouts on LucaMetal and a Zacian, then they'll get stamped to 1, and maybe we can win the game from there. Consistency, we're talking about Quick Ball, which finds every Pokemon in our deck. Metal Saucer to accelerate our energy from the discard pile switch and that kind of stuff to move in and out. Tool Scrapper, which is actually really important in this format to get rid of big charms or capes off of Pokemon like Zacian, which we couldn't otherwise knock out. We also have 1 copy of Great Catcher, just in case we want to take a knockout on a Dedenne. And we also have, that's it, that's all the items. We also have the rest of the support Pokemon, other supporters. Oh my goodness, I'm stumbling over everything here. A support line, a little bit different to the ones that we're used to. We've got 4 copies of Marnie instead of 4 Research, and 3 copies of Research instead of 4 Marnie. That's because we're relying a little bit more on our opponent playing slowly. If we use Marnie, we're going to obviously reduce the chances that our opponent plays fast. They're only going to have 4 cards in their hand. We also have Boss's Orders to gust out Pokemon to take specific knockouts. We have Mallow and Lana in a 2 of, so that we can heal damage if we're being half hit. And we also have 2 copies of Bird Keeper. This supporter, very, very strong, especially when used in conjunction with Zacian V. If we want a Brave Blade twice in a row, we can with a Bird Keeper and a switch. So very easy for us to achieve. Worst case scenario, we can just attach one of our many not fighting metal energy to a Pokemon like Crobat and then just retreat for free anyway. When it comes to those energies, we've got 11 metal and 3 weakness guard energy. Obviously, metal Pokemon at the moment are a little bit in danger because of all of the fire decks that are floating around. This special energy will do the job for you here, removing the weakness from your Pokemon so that you could potentially stand a chance a little bit longer. It is a little bit weaker than something like a Frying Pan in that it doesn't reduce the damage, but it is a little bit more persistent because we can't just get rid of it with a Tool Scrapper. You'll need to have that special energy discarded for any of that weakness to get through. So it's a pretty solid combination of energies, and as long as we don't attach a weakness guard to our Zacians, we should be fine. The rest of our Pokemon in the deck have a 1 colorless attack cost, so we can attach a weak guard energy to Zamazenta and then just move on with our lives. This is the deck, a really solid option. It's seen some success in some tournaments online in the last couple of weeks. What we'll do is we'll take it out into the ladder and see whether or not we can get ourselves a decent game with it. So once again, I have enlisted the help of Matt to get some gameplay footage here. He is the one who is in charge of the mouse at the moment, and he's won the coin flip, which is pretty good. The decision here, whether we go first or second, is a little bit awkward these days. Matt electing to go first. Sometimes some decks want to go second, which means you might want to go second to try and counter them. Welder decks particularly are quite handy going second, so if we're trying to counter those, we might choose to go second as well, but I like the idea of going first, just because old habits die hard, you know, it makes it a little bit more comfortable for me. Looks like we've found a Zacian here, which is a really good start. It means that we're guaranteed to be able to Intrepid Sword this turn. We have a Quick Ball, a Metal Energy, and a Weakness Guard, so we've got plenty of things to do. We could potentially even power up a LucaMetal this turn if we want to. Got the option to Quick Ball, and looks like that's what Matt is going to be doing. We're up against Mad Party here, which is a very interesting deck to be playing against. If we're going to be able to get a win here, we're going to need to reduce this damage pretty quickly, and Lucario Melmetal is going to be a really strong attacker in that we'll be able to not only deal damage with our Steel Fist attack, but accelerate energy as well. Looks like we have already been powered up. We're ready to go. It's just a matter of what Matt intends to do now. Do we Quick Ball first and then use our Intrepid Sword or not? Looks like he is going to go, yep, no worries. We'll Quick Ball away the Research, hit the Crobat, and see what we can get here. There's not really that much more that we really need, but we do want to kind of thin the deck out a little bit. Maybe we can try and find ourselves some energy off of our Intrepid Sword. Primate Wisdom, a really good ability in this deck. We can move that Professor's Research to the top. Try and draw that next turn, although we will grab it with the Intrepid Sword. no energy, which is disappointing, but we don't really mind. We've got our 2 attachments on LucaMetal, so that's not a problem. Our opponent on the other side of the field needs to really get themselves going here, otherwise they're going to lose a lot of Pokemon pretty quickly. They are going to really struggle to take a knockout on the first turn. They're going to get 11 Mad Party Pokemon into the discard pile. They are going second, so it's not impossible, but on their first turn, it is very, very tough to get a lot of Mad Partiers into the discard pile. So we'll see whether they can do it. If they can, we could potentially find ourselves in trouble, but if not, then we will probably be able to either take a knockout or get our GX attack off, which is a very strong place to be. Quick Ball getting rid of Island Challenge Amulet to find a DAA here. They're going to DAA change and discard their hand. That seems pretty good. They've actually attached to the Sinistea, so we could be a little bit cheeky here if we want, and Boss's orders out that Sinistea to use LucaMetal's GX attack. That would be very frustrating. A bit of a waste of a resource, but not necessarily horrible. I don't mind it. We do have the switch to get out of the active, obviously. Or we could just choose to take a knockout on that Sinistea as well. We have 2 energy attached to LucaMetal, so it shouldn't be too much to ask to get that knockout. Our opponent playing some more quick balls. There's the Duskull, which is seeing a lot of play recently. Being able to discard 3 cards from your hand means that we can very easily see a bunch of Mad Partiers in the discard pile super, super early. There's a Crobat V. It doesn't look like there's going to be enough to see that Duskull have a successful triple discard, 3 Mad Partiers, but you know, you never know, it could happen. There's the air balloon down onto the Duskull now, and I'm feeling like we are pretty close. Oh, Hoopa is a very strong supporter. We're going to look at the top 6 cards here and choose 2 to put into the hand. Means we'll discard 4, which means our opponent's going to have a chance to get a lot of Mad Partiers in the bin, but it doesn't look like there was that many there. Only 2, there was 2 Bunnelbees by the looks of it, so 4 Mad Partiers in the discard pile. We are not even close to the required 11, let alone the fact that our opponent has already attached an energy to a non-attacking Pokemon. Got the DAA coming out with the Quick Ball. We might see that Duskull ability. Here it comes, Spirit-Born Evolution, to discard 3 cards from hand. That's 3 DAAs. That's a pretty good discard if you ask me, but our opponent will need to have a solid hand. Looks like they are just choosing to sacrifice the Duskull, and we don't really mind that. We're going to be able to try and discard this energy. The Crushing Hammer doesn't work out for us in this instance, but we do have access to the boss if we'd like it. We don't really need to take a knockout on the Duskull. What we'll do is we'll attach to the active. I'm feeling like Matt is going to switch into LucaMetal and then Boss's orders out that Sinistea, which would be a really big call, but I think it's probably the right one. It looks like we're opting to Primate Wisdom here, put the Zacian on top, and there's a Mallow and Lana as well. A good supporter, but for later, we'll need that once our opponent has used their attack. We're going to Boss. Looks like Matt is grabbing that Sinistea here. We'll switch into the LucaMetal, and we're either going to GX or we're going to Steel Fist, and I'm happy to see both here, realistically. There is absolutely no reason to not use that first attack. We're not worried about the knockout just yet, so we may as well get ourselves a prize whilst we can. Our opponent, obviously having Hoopa as well is a good call. Matt going for the Full Metal Wall, discards the double colorless, the Twin Energy, and now our opponent needs even more Mad Partiers in the bin at the moment to take a knockout. They'll need 15. It's high, that's pretty high. Leaving the Sinistea in the active, oh, there we go, our opponent has conceded. Now this recording I haven't seen yet, but ominously it has been named Mill, so I feel like we might be going up against a Mill deck here, and this will be the last time we see it. From now on, as you're watching this video, rotation has hit, so this Oranguru Mill deck will not exist anymore after today. We'll have to wait and see how it fares in Expanded, because it is not in Standard format, but yeah, if we are playing against Mill, then we could be in for a long one here. We've got a Jirachi in play for our opponent and a Zacian, so that's pretty solid for us. We can get rid of our Zamazenta, we're not likely to need that here, and grab ourselves Lucario Melmetal. At this point, that would presume, okay, I'm playing up against ADP Zacian. That seems like the most logical choice. Oranguru coming down here, placing probably one of these switches on the top. We'll see if we can't find something to work with. That quick ball could be useful. It'll not only move the switch from the top deck, but it'll also shuffle ourselves around a little bit after this Crobat, which is really, really good. We'll be able to Dark Asset for 4. Let's see what we can come up with before we Intrepid Sword at the end of this turn. There's a few decent options there. Looks like we're probably just going to leave it as it is and Intrepid Sword. Obviously, Matt not to know at the moment that he is playing against Mill. So we'll see what ends up happening. There's an energy, so you probably put that into the hand, and Matt does choose to do that. It's a bit of a trap for young players, the Intrepid Sword. Well played from the opponent. It's a pretty confident start here, thinking that they are going to be able to win just from having one turn. They're chucking down the Pokédoll here, so definitely is Mill now. And as I was saying, it's a bit of a trap for young players, that Metal Energy. Sometimes you'll attach it when you don't need to, and it can cause a lot of problems. Here comes Minchino. The Chip Ice Axe has been played as well. Matt has Birdkeeper here, so he can get himself out of the active if he wants to. But Matt probably will need to find himself an extra energy if he wants to attack. Now the game plan needs to shift. And I'm thinking that Steel Fist is probably not enough. We might be looking for Heavy Impact to try and get knockouts here. We are going to attach to LucaMetal and then probably just pass. Possibly use Primate Wisdom to move one of these cards to the top of the deck. Looks like the Power Plant has fallen here, which is a pretty solid card for us. And the question is, does Matt choose to Intrepid Sword here? He knows that he's got access to Marnie, so these cards are going to go back into the deck at some point. So he probably can afford to. We're looking for a couple of energy here. Crushing Hammer, very frustrating, but a Tails means that we won't need to use the Metal Patch. It's a bit rough, giving him the Broken Heart after one missed Crushing Hammer. That's okay though. And now the Make Do from our opponent as well. And yeah, Mill is a very frustrating deck to play against. Not in that it is hard to beat, because if you know how to beat Mill, you can definitely do it. Just that it is a little bit awkward if you're not entirely sure how to go about it. It looks like Matt going, okay, well, I'm going to put one of these Marnies on top of the deck, and then we might play one as well. Potentially could be an option. Maybe even using Birdkeeper here to switch into LucaMetal. Looks like no, we're just going to go into the LucaMetal here and then Marnie. That means that we can potentially find ourselves a copy of Metal Energy. No Metal Energy, but Weak Guard is present, so the first knockout is going to be happening here. Steel Fist takes no prizes on the Lily's Pokédoll, but we are able to accelerate an energy from the deck, which is very, very positive. Means that Heavy Impact is one card away, and that's going to be a really solid attack for us in this matchup, because 150 damage is super, super reliable. We've also got the Marnie in the hand, so worst case scenario, we'll be able to deal a bit of a blow if our opponent has a big hand size. Although at this point we're happy, if I'm Matt, I'm happy just taking knockouts, right? As long as I can win some prizes here, that's the key. But my opponent not allowing us to do that. Lily's Pokédoll coming down, and there'll be a retreat into that, you would presume. So this is going to be a bit of a long one here, but I think that's fair. I mean, we want to have one last look at Mill before it disappears. Belelba and Bryson Man, again, another card that's going in tomorrow's rotation, or today's rotation actually, as you're watching this, or yesterday's rotation, I'm not entirely sure. When did I record this video? It doesn't matter. And an Intrepid Sword from our opponent. We also top deck an energy. That's really strong. We can attach that to Zacian and then Metal Saucer as well. We've got two powered attackers now. I'm thinking that Matt either goes for a Marnie or just hits with the Steel Fist. Looks like Marnie is the way to go. And that Tool Scrapper could be very big. We could potentially remove the ability of our opponent to get that Jirachi out of the active. Matt going, nah, I'm just going to take the knockout here and accelerate another energy potentially. Now again, we've got those two in the hand, so not required. Next turn, we could even see a Boss's Orders into a knockout on that Zacian, which would be a really big call. Friend Ball coming down here. And we'll see another Chinchino. Obviously, our opponent taking advantage of the fact that we have Oranguru in play to get that extra Make Do into the field. There goes a Resource Management Oranguru, so not a great card to be discarding. Obviously, our opponent plays Ordinary Rod, so it's not impossible for them to get that back. Another discard of a Zacian V. That's a fine discard. Our opponent doesn't really mind about that. And another Pokédoll coming into the field of play. Very frustrating. You're going to need to take a knockout on that Pokédoll, or else we use the boss's orders in hand. This Mars could put pay to that, though. Drawing 2 cards and discarding a random card from our hand. If it's boss, that's bad. It's just a Metal Energy. That's fine. We're not too worried about that at all. We could potentially use Heavy Impact this turn to take a knockout on one of the 3 support Pokemon on our opponent's side of the field, or we can gust up the Zacian if we do happen to draw a switch, try and get ourselves 2 prizes. At the moment, though, you would presume that Matt will be happy to just get rid of that escape board, attach an energy, possibly gust up something, and then take a knockout. But it depends here. There's a lot of moving pieces. You can see a knockout on pretty much anything. It's just a matter of what our opponent wants to put into the active afterwards. Looks like the boss is coming down here. Going to grab a Chinchino. We'll attach the energy and Heavy Impact. That seems perfectly fine. The Primate Wisdom will put the Oranguru on top. And we'll see what we can find. Mallow Lana, which means that we're potentially able to attack again next turn. Although that Pokédoll probably comes into the active unless our opponent promotes the Jirachi, which of course means that they are going to have a retreat option. So, looking pretty rough here. Matt still has a fair few cards to go, but it's not a great position to be in. Attacking 3 times for 1 prize isn't ideal. And the more time that Mill gets to set up, the more likely they are to win. We obviously will see Oranguru coming down at some point to resource management and utilize their kind of regenerative properties as a discard of a Chinchino to draw a basic Pokemon. You'd think there'd probably be that Oranguru coming out now. But no, just another Jirachi, so perhaps thinking Stellar Wish is the right play here. Not entirely sure whether it is the right one, but I'm sure that our opponent knows what they're doing. They're going to get it knocked out here. They're going to get knocked out by this Lucario Melmetal. If they leave the Jirachi in the active, you'd think that they're going to need to switch into the Lily's Pokédoll in order to avoid that. But the best thing is there's only 4 in our opponent's deck, and 3 of them have been accounted for, so we're going to be potentially able to deal with that. A Farber here is very, very frustrating. If that does get used here, we could be in a bit of strife. But the boss's orders comes out. They're bossing up the Oranguru. Maybe they cannot get this Jirachi out of the active, which means that's a bit of a brave, bold call to leave the Jirachi there. And here's the Intrepid Sword, so we are set and ready to go here. We've got Birdkeeper and Mallow Lana that we can use to retreat. I'm thinking Birdkeeper is a pretty strong option. Not only will we be able to retreat back into the Lucario Melmetal, but we'll be able to draw some cards as well. And I'm thinking we hold that Metal Energy just because we know our opponent has access to Farber. That would be very annoying if we were to find ourselves losing our energy without being able to reattach. Here comes the Heavy Impact. We'll take knockout on the Jirachi. We go down to 4 prizes. So now we're in a spot where really we've got access to most of the stuff that we need already. And look at this, we find boss's orders off of the top deck. So our opponent might have given us a chance here if we are able to maintain this Boar State. Another Lily's Pokédoll for our opponent, and then a Make Do, but they don't have access to Jirachi. They only have access to Zacian. And I feel like if we take a knockout on a Zacian, we could be in a really strong spot. Crushing Hammer comes down here, a Heads, which is frustrating. Removes an energy from LucaMetal. That's not too bad if we're trying to knock out Pokédolls. It is obviously pretty bad if we want to knock out Chinchinos, because we'll need to commit another energy. But at the moment, looking pretty good, because our opponent's not they're not reusing their resources. At the moment, they don't have Oranguru, so they can't use their resources again and again and again. It means that we're in a good spot to just continue to Steel Fist and use Heavy Impact and try and win from there. Here's Farber, so that will remove the weakness energy. That'll go straight into the Lost Zone, and we obviously can't use that anymore. But that's their supporter for turn. They're not going to be able to do anything else here apart from Intrepid Sword, and that's really strong for us because it means that Oranguru isn't in the active, and as long as we can keep attacking, we'll be able to get our prizes. Eventually, our opponent's going to need to promote Oranguru. It's as simple as that. They have to use it. So if we can keep taking knockouts, I think we're going to be okay. Matt just trying to decide here, where's the best place for this energy? It looks like it's going to go onto the active. We'll Primate Wisdom the Oranguru again. See what we can find. A Metal Energy. It's pretty interesting. Not necessarily amazing. We'll just Steel Fist, take the knockout on the Pokédoll. Very annoying not being able to get that there, but we can accelerate an energy to LucaMetal, which I don't mind. It means that now we have at least got ourselves an option if we do want to take a knockout on the Zacian, and that could be a really big call. Like I said, eventually our opponent has to promote Oranguru, or otherwise they will lose, because mill decks, even though they're milling us, rely on getting down to a low amount of cards in deck to execute combinations. Make do happening here, removing a Mew from their hand to draw 2 new cards. And it depends, of course, what they find, but we could be in a good spot. Crushing Hammer would be awkward. There's another Heads, discarding that Metal Energy. There is the Oranguru, so they're going to have to put that in play at some point. Lieutenant Surge coming down. We might even see an Articuno come out, which would be very annoying. Would remove all of the energy from our LucaMetal, which would be very, very bad. And they've sniped the Mallow Lana as well, so all of our potential comeback plays gone there. The water energy on that Oranguru means that we do potentially lose this game unless we top deck a switch, which is pretty awful. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Yell Grunt coming down here, that's also pretty annoying. But it's only removing the energy from the active, so not too annoyed by that. It means that in all likelihood we won't be seeing the Articuno GX come through here. If they had the Articuno, they would have removed the energy from the bench Zacian so that they could stop the return knockout. We're seeing the Ordinary Rod put Oranguru and Zacian back into the deck. That's obviously going to allow them to use resource management multiple times. And now our opponent in a really interesting spot. Are they going to retreat into the Oranguru here, or are they just going to pass with the Pokédoll in the active? It's potentially a better move. Looks like the Power Pad being used to get Surge and Mars back into the deck, and then an Intrepid Sword will draw 3 of their 8 remaining cards. Looks like Matt just having a bit of a squiz here. What kind of cards do we have access to? We've top decked a Crushing Hammer, which is a pretty cool option. It's not amazing. Let's use Primate Wisdom here and see whether anything else comes up, because we're not in a position where we really want to use Crushing Hammer. That Metal Saucer could potentially be really strong. We could Metal Saucer to Zacian and then retreat manually with Lucario Melmetal to take a knockout on the Zacian V on the bench. As soon as our opponent starts playing Bellelba and Bryson Man, they will remove that. So that is a big deal. Looks like Matt going for the Crushing Hammer here. Here's the attachment to the active. Is it just going to be a Steel Fist, or does Matt choose to use Boss's Orders? It's a big decision to make, because the longer we don't... Oh, it looks like just an Intrepid Sword here from Matt. That's a really interesting play. Our opponent on 5 prizes. Now Matt leaving himself in a position where if our opponent does choose to use Articuno, they can potentially get returned by the Zacian. But this is a big gamble, because this definitely could... This could fail. This could definitely fail. It is not impossible. Let's put it that way. Surge coming down. What are we going to see next? We're going to see next a Make Do, removing a Jirachi from the hand. There's 2 cards left in deck, so we might see a Mars being played here to discard a random card from our hand. Hopefully it's the Great Catcher or the Power Plant or Crushing Hammer or something like that. There's a lot of cards that we don't need. There's a Boss, very annoying, probably bringing that Oranguru up again, and a Mars. So now we are in a real awkward spot. They remove the Metal Energy from hand as well. That is really bad. But on the plus side, we are going to see a resource management here, so if we can get into the active, we'll be able to take a knockout, but it is a little bit unlikely at present. Here comes the resource management from our opponent. They're putting their deck up to 4 cards. We know they've got 1 more Lily's Pokédoll left as well. Alright, Matt, hopefully everything goes well from here. This is a bit of a dicey spot. We've got all the energy in the world, but no way to retreat. The resource management is setting up our opponent to try and win the game as quickly as possible. If they do get a good resource management, as well as the combination of cards in their hand, then they will be sitting absolutely pretty here. Best case scenario for us is we top deck a switch and then Boss's Orders and knock out the Zacian. I think that's probably a pretty good play, although it is not in any way guaranteed. Surge Boss and Ordinary Rod going back into the deck from our opponent on that resource management. And now our hand is in the Fates. Looks like Eldegoss is in our hand now. That's a pretty solid top deck to get. It means we can use Birdkeeper or Mallow Lana if we'd like to try and get that Oranguru out of the active. Both of those cards are present. We could potentially also see a Primate Wisdom to look for a switch. We've only used 2 so far, but it looks like Nomad's going to try and confirm it. The Birdkeeper will be played here. It looks like he's going to retreat into Zacian to guarantee that knockout. I don't mind that. There's always the gamble that you could put the LucaMetal in the active. If you do, you need an energy. So Birdkeeper, out it comes. That seems pretty solid. We find a second Birdkeeper as well, so that is pretty good. We can Primate Wisdom. We're going to use that Oranguru again, constantly putting him back on the top of the deck. And then we can also play Reset Stamp, which is a really, really good option for us. Remove their massive hand. They'll draw 6, but there's 13 cards now they don't have access to, and they only are going to be able to utilize 1 of their Chinchinos. So this could be a big, big play from Matt here, setting up a potential winning position if everything works out. Another Reset Stamp, that's a good card to have access to. And we also see our opponent promote Zacian here. So that means with our Birdkeeper, we can potentially retreat into one of our Eldegoss or Crobat and then manually retreat for a knockout, presuming that that Zacian does stay in the active. 2 cards into the hand with the Make Do here, discarding Zacian V. It's not a bad card to get rid of for our opponent. The best thing here is that we've really disrupted the way that they play. They can't get control if they don't have access to all of the pieces in their deck. So we're in a good spot. A Wonder Lab, though, that's very awkward. We do have the Power Plant in our hand to replace it, though, so that's pretty good. A Team Yell Grunt also, and they're looking to try and lock us out of attacking here. And a Bellelba and Bryson Man. We'll see 3 cards from both sides of the field getting discarded. We didn't really lose too much there. We have access to a metal, and it looks like here comes the Resource Management Oranguru. This is a very interesting spot to be in. The question is, how do we go about getting... Oh, a switch. Okay, so suddenly, this is not so bad. We can play down Power Plant, we can attach a metal, switch, and then use our Birdkeeper to take 2 prizes on this Zacian, and we will have 2 powered attackers with which we can take a couple of prizes, potentially. We've got the switch here, we'll take the knockout on the Zacian. We can also maybe even use the Metal Saucer if we wanted to accelerate energy onto the LucaMetal. Looks like Matt choosing to just hold that for next turn. There's 8 cards in deck, which is a low, low number. But if we are going to get milled, our opponent is going to need to deal a little bit more damage than 8. They're going to need a little bit more damage than 6, which is what they're capable of doing. It looks like Matt might just be about to get over the line here. Our opponent obviously down to that last card in deck, but they've got not a lot set up here. We have 2 powered attackers, we've got switch, we've got energy, so it doesn't really matter what our opponent chooses to do here, as long as we can get in and out of the active. If they remove a couple of energy from our Zacian, that would be really bad, but it looks like they're going for Boss to grab out the Oranguru again, but yet again we have the way to get out. Switch and Birdkeeper obviously coming in real handy in this particular matchup. So I feel like we're about to see a victory here. Oh, Matt's hovering over the "you have a good deck" button. That is, that is obnoxious. But it's good to see that we've got ourselves a win over Mill. Our opponent might potentially even choose to switch into a Pokédoll here to try and avoid the game, but if that is the case, we'll obviously just boss and switch anyway. So we're looking like we're in a pretty solid spot. Here comes the Pokédoll. Is one of the last cards in their hand a switch? It is. So they've done pretty much all they can here to try and stop us winning this game. We've got boss, we've got switch, we've got everything that we need. We'll attach the Lucametal. We will switch into that LucaMetal, looks like, yes, and then we'll boss out the Oranguru. Goodbye, Oranguru. We will not miss you. Mill decks are gone forever. 150 damage, and the final prize. I think that game took about 20 minutes. Thanks for sticking with it. So LucaMetal pretty solid. There's obviously a few bad matchups floating around, but I tell you what, I'm really glad that we managed to get the win against that mill deck at the end there. That could have been very awkward indeed, sitting there for 20 minutes just to lose. Thanks everyone, especially Matt for recording this video, the gameplay in this video anyway. Thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, consider subscribing. Click the button over the top of the Sableye head. Over on this side, we have some videos that YouTube thinks you'll like, and a playlist down the bottom for more Darkness Ablaze deck profiles and gameplay. Thank you, and we'll see you next time for more from the Sableyes.